Welcome to the Author Blurb podcast. I'm your host, Eric Maynard. I'm an author. I enjoy talking to other authors. If you've been watching this show, you kind of get where I'm going with this. So it's all about trying to connect you, the readers, the listeners, whoever is here listening and hearing the sound of my voice, or possibly watching me, to other authors, to authors that you can enjoy and authors that you can connect with and find stories that you want to read, listen to the audio, however you can. So, with that being said, I'd like to say that today I'm speaking with Fanus Woldegebriel, and if I mispronounce it or sound kind of funny, I'm horrible with foreign languages and last names especially. I'm surprised I haven't had more people say things in all truth, but I try. And most of all, I try to make sure that the conversations overall are enjoyable and informational, gives you everything you need to decide if you want to get to know the authors better. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the conversation I had with Fanus. We had a great conversation. She had a lot of insight and information. Her book on immigration mental health is phenomenal. It's not strictly set for just people that are immigrants, but the mental health issue that she faced coming from an immigrant family. And I think it would be a valuable tool for people that want to know more or find more insights to be able to help themselves. So with that being said, enjoy the show. But before I let you go on to the show, remember authorblurb.com, the website, has all the profiles, articles that they write. They have different things that they give me. You can sometimes see profile pictures of books that the authors send me where they sign it, and I try to show you guys that I do get these books. So with that being said, go to the website. You can find where the show is being played at if you don't want to play it on the website. I don't understand why you wouldn't. But you can also watch it on YouTube, Rumble, and I imagine there's a few other places that I'm just not thinking of as well. So with that being said, go check it out. Check it out after the show, however you prefer. But one thing I do want you to do is tell other people. That's the first and foremost thing that helps us grow. And the more we grow, the more authors that I can give you. So please enjoy it, share it, rate me, tell people about me. Anything is a great thing, and I appreciate all of it. So thank you very much. I'm here with Fanus, and we're discussing her book, and it's dealing with mental illness with immigration. And, you know, instead of me going in and trying to explain it, because it is a very in-depth subject and very, very personal as well from what the reviews on your book says, can you go in and tell me a bit about yourself, about the book, and then we can go into discussing it a bit more?
Sure. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and share my story. Here is my book. This is the print copy. It's Immigrant Mental Health, and the subtitle is One Woman's Spiritual Journey Towards Healing. And it's my personal healing journey. I was born in Khartoum, Sudan, and my family and I immigrated here when I was 18 months old. I like to tell people I was born and raised in Chicago because I don't remember anything about Sudan.
Right.
But I've been in Chicago all my life. And in this book, I go into detail about my mom who had schizophrenia and who still has it and is medicated, but how her illness affected me throughout my various milestones in life, through elementary school, high school, college, beyond, and how I developed a codependent condition, anxiety. I kind of didn't know I was living with generational trauma. And so this book, I gave birth to this book during COVID. Actually, staying at home, felt like I had ants in my pants. I was forced to kind of reckon with my thoughts. It was a very uncomfortable period for me, but I leaned into it. I can save the details for your upcoming questions, but that's how the book came about. It came out through COVID. I come from an immigrant background myself, and the reason I wrote this book is at first I always wanted a book to read that had mental illness from an immigrant perspective, because there's the culture and the language barriers that I had never felt were expressed in other books. And then also, writing this book was a healing process for me. I felt like layers of hurts and trauma, and I actually feel like I have a new life. Writing this book was just, it gave me a new meaning to life and a new mindset.
All right. So from what I understand, you came here as an infant or a little baby.
Yes.
So now your parents immigrated here, and when they did so, I imagine, did they speak English, or were they just diving into the culture, trying to learn it as they came over?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. So my parents, they fled their home country, which was Ethiopia, who had a famine and a civil war, and went to a second country, Sudan, and that's where I was born. And there, as they were being processed to come to the U.S., my mom says that there were like English classes and American cultural classes that they were taking, so that when they arrived here, everything would not be so new. But it was definitely new. They were grown adults who spent most of their lives speaking, one or two other languages. So there's the cultural shock, and then there's the trauma of war and poverty and death that they brought with them, who we actually inherited not knowing. And so that's what I talk about in this book. It may be from an immigrant's perspective, but we all carry generational trauma. And then I like to say in this book also that, this great country is a melting pot. Everyone has an immigrant background.
Right.
I met a neighbor whose mom was French and dad was Hungarian. It's just, this is a melting pot. Everyone has a story about where their family came from. And unfortunately, we not only take the good looks and hair from our family, but also the emotional trauma, and the passage to America sometimes it's brutal. It comes with a lot of loss and sacrifice. And so we carry all that on a daily basis, and it seeps out into work and social life and family and marriage. And until we can name it and kind of detox ourselves from it, it plays out in really, really difficult ways.
All right. So let me ask this, and if I'm going overboard with the questions, please let me know. So, because I don't want to push anywhere I don't belong. But so, coming from an immigrant family, you most likely I think in the information you sent me in your profile on authorblurb.com, you said that you were in uptown Chicago, which is a very diverse, very like people from all over the world, not just your culture or your parents' cultures, but all sorts. So with that being said, you've had experience dealing with all different sorts of cultures that blended into yours. Your parents, like I can promise that my wife, she's from China. She has her tradition, her way of things, and how she grew up doing stuff. So, and me, I grew up in the Midwest of Ohio, or the middle of Ohio, basically, and it's a lot different than the different ways as she grew up. So we bring our differences together and basically raise the kids and hope that we don't strangle each other most days. With that being said, what is it, in your opinion, from your family, they're bringing their, like you said, their traumas and things like that? Do you think it was something that was passed through the parents in the sense of, my parents are showing me this, they're dealing with this, so I inherited because of that? Or do you think it was something else?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. I didn't even know to name it as generational trauma until 2020. So I'm now going back into my youth, trying to transcribe what happened to get a better understanding. So I think they didn't show us the trauma, they carried it. So mental illness is just such a taboo subject. not only in immigrant communities, but just across the world, globally. People with mental illnesses are seen as crazy, weak, or possessed by the devil. And with the immigrant community, you never show signs of weakness. You are not allowed to slow down. You had to show how fortunate you were to be in America, and so you worked extra hard to kind of show this image of a strong, working American. And I think that even now, being a parent, I think that's the kind of trauma that you enforce on your kids, because you're telling them that you have to always be perfect by not telling them you have to be perfect, by just showing that you can't slow down and you can't show signs of weaknesses, and you don't really show your emotions. Now, as a parent, I look at it as I have to be able to slow down. I have to be able to show that there are work-life balances, that we have feelings, that it's okay to express your feelings. It is not a sign of weakness. So if I go back in my childhood, which, as you said, Uptown is an amazing area, very diverse. I met so many people that have been through a lot of stuff, but we never talked about what we actually went through. The wars that we went through, the nightmares that people are having, not having a licensed mental therapist in the community to kind of talk people through that post-traumatic stress. Not having those things and not growing up around those things enabled me to become an adult and not even know that something was wrong with me.
I understand.
Yeah.
So with that, then, what is your book focusing on in the sense of where does it start? What are you trying to guide people into to get you understanding the whole mental illness issues and the recovery and lessons learned that are in your book? Where does it start with? Where does it lead people into? Where do we go with it?
Yeah, it starts with self, and just allowing yourself to kind of slow down, and not believing that taking time for yourself and practicing self-care or mindfulness activities is not a selfish thing to do. I use a proverb here. It's Ethiopian proverb in Tigrinya. It's haba ikoslu haba ikosu. The rough English translation is the one who hides his wound is also hiding his cure. So that's a big theme in the book. I mentioned that proverb actually brought me out of my shell. So just not only self-care, not only sitting with yourself, but actually asking yourself, what wounds do I have that I'm just numbing myself with social media, comfort food, shopping therapy, and kind of removing the wound and just let it air out. And then we'll notice that just kind of uncovering it itself brings us halfway to healing. We spend a lot of time numbing ourselves, forgetting our wounds, because it hurts to process it, and it's so much easier to forget it, again, by all those things, by numbing ourselves. So the biggest theme in this book is to slow down and to kind of look within. We have the power to heal ourselves, but it's when we're being vulnerable, not with a crowd of people, not at work or at church or in the community, but by ourselves in the mirror, and then just saying, these are my wounds. My wounds, I don't wear them like a shirt. They don't define me. I will air them out, because airing them out and looking at them brings me halfway to healing. There's power in that.
So with this type of illness that you're discussing, that you said your mom has a schizophrenia, I think you said it was, which obviously is going to affect you growing up. And do you think that was caused by her life experiences, things that's happened, or possible other issues that the medication is the only way of curing? I guess I'm trying to figure out, because this is going to lead to my next question, is do you also think that mental illness, because I know that I've talked with a gentleman before where some issues with the brain, he shows science can help fix problems with your brain, with different ways that it operates and processes stuff. So do you think that the environment had a big part to play with the situation? Because your mom's situation definitely had a effect on your situation.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I believe because she had unprocessed trauma and hurt, it evolved into mental illness because she had nowhere to air it out. That I honest to God believe that. She came here with young children, new language, new culture, still have not processed war, death, trauma, poverty, and then on top of that, taking kids to school, cooking, cleaning, learning the language, not being able to care for her wound. She just kept dressing it and dressing it and dressing it. And then it got to a level when we were old enough where we didn't need her to like bathe us or put us in bed. It manifested into an illness because then she was not that busy. In the past, she was constantly like mom duty 24 hours a day. Then mom duty kind of, decreased. And then that's when it manifested into voices and she got extremely sick. And so for the longest, I've debated with mental illness, is it really a chemical imbalance? Is it brought through our environment? I think it's a little bit of both. And can science and medication cure it? Yes. I mean, my mom is medicated right now. But in my book, I talk about there were a few times where I took her to Ethiopia where she was having these manic episodes. She was not sleeping nonstop. I was having panic attacks at work. I could not function. And I did not want her to go to the hospital because when she's in the hospital, if anyone who's been to a mental hospital, it's not the most happy place. There's a lot of people sick and the doctor to patient ratio is huge. And so what they do is they medicate people. So people are walking there like zombies and the smell is just, so I thought to myself a few times, I don't want her to be subjugated to that type of treatment, So we went to Ethiopia. And at that, mind you, I was not born in Ethiopia, but because I knew of Ethiopia, I know there's a lot of religious retreats. And I in my infinite wisdom at that time, I said, okay, let's take her off of the medication. Let's travel abroad where it's just going to be nature and prayer retreats. And every time we went there, we came back stronger. She was not 100% healed, but just being off of the medication, being in a different society, just being in nature and being immersed in like meditation and praying, it helped. I mean, it helped me more than it helped her because she was not healed all the way, but it helped me to come back and deal with her sickness.
Okay, so with that, so do you still use like some of the things that you found when you were in Ethiopia that helped you heal yourself? The prayer, the meditations, the getting back out into nature. I know with COVID, that was hard to do, to get out because everybody seemed to be trying to hide in their own little corners. Have you found that practicing those features are helping you, and do you discuss that in the book?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of forgot about all those things for a few years when I got back here, and it wasn't until COVID where everyone was scared to go outside, and I lived like 5 minutes away from Lake Michigan, so I'd walk to the beach, and there'd be no one there, and I just sit in silence and hear the waves and the birds chirping, and it just centered me and gave me so much peace. So that became my daily practice, probably 2 or 3 times a day. So it does help. I'm doing it now more than I did the years after I came from Ethiopia, and even now I try to go outside once or twice a day, and sometimes it's just opening my front door and then just looking at the sky just does something.
Well, they say sunshine and fresh air is usually the best cure for a lot of things.
Yeah.
So now I know.
Never heard that before. That's good to know.
Well, I know like one thing that I've talked with a lot of people, and one thing, like I have a exercise bike in my office because I need to make sure I get up and move because I can get wrapped up in my own world.
Yeah.
It's said that one, your brain works. If you ever notice while you're out doing something, while you're moving, active, your mind starts with ideas and different things to help that you're trying to solve problems. They say that a lot of the interactions with the world, a lot of exercise and movement tends to help your brain process everything else. And it sounds like that's what you found as well, and you've made it part of your standard practice with getting up, going outside, even just looking outside for a little bit. Is there other things that you discuss that helps people? And then I have some other questions I'm gonna lean in towards with the immigration side of it.
Yeah.
What other things do you find that's helpful that you do or you address to help with mental illness?
Yeah, I journaling was really, really good. I had a therapist, not ashamed to say that. I had a therapist, I had a life coach. I read a lot. I read more books in 2020 than I did from 2000 to 2019. I found this quote that I really liked. Reading to the mind is what exercise is to the body.
Right.
I binged on all the good stuff. Like, I was not on social media and Netflix, but I read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I found this quote early on during the pandemic that kind of helped me towards this deep spiritual awakening that I had, or conscious awakening. Once a student is ready, the teacher appears. So once I had a shifted mindset that I'm not a victim and I'm always, sad because I'm taking care of my mom, and there's just always this cycle of healing her, being mentally exhausted, and then pretending like everything is okay by keeping myself busy. Once I found that quote, and I started to read, I started to listen to podcasts, everything around me became a teacher. Right. So what I tell readers and anyone who has an open mind is just open your mindset to kind of learning. And once you are a student, literally the teacher will appear. It's okay with mental illness to talk to a therapist, to get a life coach. Say you don't have the health coverage for you to get a licensed health coach. There's a lot of material online, on YouTube, where therapists are talking. Life coaches have podcasts. There's books for free. There's a lot of stuff in the library. So even if you don't have the resources to speak to someone one-on-one, there's a lot of free resources online. And again, go back to the proverb, just remove that Band-Aid and embrace that wound that you have, and just embracing it and looking at it, and just there's power in not allowing that wound to to pull you down. That's what worked for me.
All right. It sounds like fantastic advice to me. So thanks. What effect as a immigration from an immigrant family do you think that is different that you had to deal with compared to, say, somebody that grew up in Chicago that's maybe third, fourth, 10th generation here in the country? I think you would be considered, since you came here as a baby, I think you'd almost be considered a first generation.
Yeah.
So with being a first generation, what do you think the difference between what you grew up with versus what other people have dealt with?
Yeah, that's a good question. As a first generation immigrant, versus someone that has, 4 or 5 generations, we have direct ties to the country. We have direct firsthand knowledge. If it were peaceful times, we probably would not have a lot of difference. But when there's war and there's poverty and there's trauma, we have that firsthand information. So when there's a war and someone dies, or we hear it in the news, or my mom is talking about her childhood and how she was barefoot for most of her childhood, and I can see the bruises on her feet, where she lived without electricity and running water. I know all that information. So I carry her experience with me on every single day journey. So when I'm sitting next to a 5th grader or 6th grader in elementary school, and the teacher says, tomorrow is Thanksgiving, celebrate Thanksgiving, I probably have to go home and explain Thanksgiving to my mom versus that person who already grew up celebrating it for generations. Now my mom, she knows Thanksgiving, and she's the first one to remind us of it. But we're talking about 25, 30 years ago,
right,
where we were learning as a household about everything in America all at the same time. And sometimes I had to explain a lot more to my mom because she just didn't know all this information. So the difference between me and a fellow Chicagoan would be that firsthand direct knowledge, experience, and exposure to what's going on in that home country, or what we've experienced maybe when I went to Ethiopia myself, and what my parents have experienced.
And you mentioned having to explain like different American cultural things like Thanksgiving. I imagine Christmas, 4th of July, Flag Day, whatever because a lot of traditions aren't celebrated all over the world, obviously. Obviously, 4th of July, Flag Day, Thanksgiving are just American-only cultural holidays. Christmas, I think, is celebrated in a lot of other countries, but not all over the world. How was it for you? Do you think it put strain on you to have to go and explain it and try to help your mom and help your family embrace the different holidays of the American culture? And then do you think the Ethiopian, because I'm assuming, so if I'm wrong, correct me, you also celebrated Ethiopian cultural holidays. Did those kind of conflict with each other, and how did it feel to basically try to discuss those with your mom?
Yeah, I mean, since we were kids, you probably experienced this with your kids. It's very easy to kind of get your parents to do what you want, right?
Sure.
So it was the only resistance we've had growing up was with Halloween, because my mom was like, no, that's demonic. We're not doing that. That's
right.
So, but every other holiday, because it's on TV, it's on, you go to the grocery store. So we actually grew up celebrating both. We're Christians. So the Ethiopian church has a different calendar. We don't celebrate using the Gregorian calendar, so different counting system. So basically we have Christmas, Easter, and other holidays, Christian holidays, Epiphany, but it's just not following the Gregorian calendar. So we grew up celebrating American Christmas, Ethiopian Christmas, American Easter. So I'd always, be the first one to brag at work, hey, I'm celebrating Christmas twice, or I'm celebrating Easter twice with you guys and then at home. So we've been able to embrace both. I mean, like I said, there was never a time where we came home and we said, we want to celebrate. It was this Halloween, she'd say, I'll bring you all the candies you want. You are not going to people's homes asking for candies. You can dress however you want at home. And I just end up not liking Halloween because of that, which is totally fine. But my parents, and especially my mom, was very open with just kind of being a supportive mom and embracing the country that she's in, even though she really didn't understand it, because she knew this is her home now, and so she did accept it.
I understand. So now, how's that translate into, mind you, I hear the kids in the background, so I'm imagining you're raising your kids. How does that translate into what you went through, what you learned when you dealt with everything, and then into raising your children? Because now you're the mother, you're the one that's exploring everything, and you're the one that has to explain and try to help them understand. How do you find that to be with everything you know now? What are you trying to do differently to help improve so they don't have the same issues you had?
Yeah, thank you. I only have one child. It's my husband playing with our baby. So, kids, you got to be a baby to play with a baby. My baby's going to be 1 year old soon. So it just so happened that I gave birth to this book right before getting married and then having a baby. To me, when I look at the grand picture, I believe it was probably God's way of preparing me for motherhood, to kind of heal myself and enable me to be a better mother and a better wife. So every single day, I think about what I was, what I was exposed to as a young child, the things we weren't allowed to talk about, not seeing my mom rest. My mom never had a self-care day. I never saw her do something for herself. It was feeding us, clothing us, dropping stuff off for other people. So right now, that's one thing I want to emphasize for my child or children in the future is it's okay to slow down. Just kind of, what we're calling now trending mental health day. It doesn't even need a label like that. It's just
Right.
literally self-care and slowing down, being in the moment. There's a lot that I want to share with him, but it's just a little too early. But I have a new mindset, and I think the birth of this book is just the timing. It's more than a coincidence.
Well, sounds good. And trust me, I know how much time a little one can take, considering I think I think today's the 6th, so she's just over 7 months now.
Oh.
So just starting to try to walk. So definitely, I know a lot of my writing. I'm glad I got 3 books out before she was born, because
That's great.
getting the other book out right now is almost impossible for most days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with that, do you find that you find more hope in the future for your daughter than you find in yourself, or do you think that the two of you together, your whole family together, is able to grow even more since you've learned all this?
Yeah, it's the last one you said. It's a baby boy.
Okay.
But yeah, we're a new family, literally a new family, and we have a new mindset. We may have been exposed and brought up with a lot of things that we can't control, but my husband and I are very, very intentional into every single thing that we do, everything that we bring into our homes, the circle of friends that we have, the type of energy that we operate with. I don't want to carry the past trauma as a wound. I just take it as a learning experience. I like to say that things happen for a reason. I believe in divine timing. All the difficult things and the secrets that I was able to talk about in this book became the purpose for this book. It became the purpose for me to release all of that. So the book is out. I have been renewed, and I have a new mindset, and my whole family is the same way, myself and my husband.
Well, that sounds wonderful. So I'm going to ask one final question before we end the conversation, but who do you think is going to be best served by this book? Because I can picture a few people, but I'm curious, who do you think would benefit from reading your book?
Yeah, that's a good question. From the title, obviously it seems like, okay, immigrant mental health will help benefit an immigrant, but the principles, the things discussed in this book do not only pertain to immigrant people. These are human issues. These are life issues. These are feeling issues. So I think anyone who wants to focus on their mental health, anyone who wants to have a renewed mind and to grow, will definitely benefit from this book. If you have an immigrant background, then that's an added benefit, because then you can look at this book and say, oh my God, that sounds like my mom, or that sounds like my dad, or that's like my experience. But overall, anyone who picks up this book it can really, really benefit from it, because these are human issues that we all can relate to.
Sounds perfect. That's kind of where I was thinking as well, but I know some people, they have specific people they want to focus on. So with that, I want to say thank you for being on. I appreciate you being here. Where, other than authorblurb.com, where I have all the information you've given me there for people to find you, where do you find it's best for people to find you?
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This has been great. I'm extremely grateful. I can be found at my website, and it's almost the tagline of my book, immigrantmentalhealth.com. And then on Instagram and Facebook, you can find me at immigrant.mentalhealth.
All right, perfect. So thank you again. This is the end of the conversation for everybody else. But if you hold on for me for just a minute, we'll talk a little bit afterwards.
Okay, thank you so much, Eric. Appreciate it.
Thank you.